All right, so improving gut health. Are you really getting your nutrients? So our agenda for this evening is, so we're looking at what are the nutrients, because it's important to understand what the nutrients are that we're trying to get into our body. And then we'll look at the different components of digestion, of that process of getting our nutrients. And that is through these digestive processes of mechanical processing, chemical processing, structural processing, microbial processing. So those are the 4 types of digestion. And then we'll get into the action steps, what you can practically do to improve your gut health, and we'll round it out with an herbal bonus before the Q&A. All right, so let's dive into the nutrients. So you are not what you eat, but what your body can do with what you eat. And that's a quote from Andrea Nakayama. She is one of my mentors now. I'm actually in a program with her Functional Nutrition Alliance. It's a 10-month program where I am learning the depths of how the body works, of how food interacts with the body, so that I am in a better position to help you guys even more. You guys know, as we work together historically, that a lot of what I've shared with you is based on my personal experience, based on intuition and spiritual gifts. And this is kind of me combining the study with the faith in order to make sure that I am serving you all in the best way possible. And so big kudos to Andrea Nakayama and the group. They have provided me with a lot of the understanding that I'll be sharing with you tonight. And if any of you guys want more information on going deep on nutrition with that, just go ahead and let me know afterwards. So we are looking here at a chicken sandwich. So in order for our body to use the nutrients well, we have to take the macronutrients and use those processing methods that I explained and turn them into micronutrients. So first we have the carbohydrates. So the bun or bread of your chicken sandwich is composed primarily of carbohydrates. So we're using the different parts of the sandwich to represent the different nutrients. Then we have fat, which comes from the dressing or mayonnaise that's on your burger or your chicken sandwich, and then protein from the chicken itself. And then we have the lettuce and tomato, which have many other nutrients in them. But for purposes of the presentation tonight, we're using the lettuce and tomato to represent fiber and show the beneficial components of fiber and how it helps the gut. So if we look at starting with the carbohydrates, our body converts carbohydrates to energy in the form of simple sugars. So you take your carbohydrates, break them down into monosaccharides, which is just a fancy way of saying single sugars. And most of the food we eat breaks down from a carbohydrate perspective into glucose, fructose, and galactose. And these different sugar components are used by the body to produce energy, the energy that we run with, the energy that we move with, the energy that we use for all chemical processes, just the energy for the functioning of the brain, the body itself, everything. So these carbohydrates get converted into these simple sugars, and then the body uses them to produce the energy that we do everything with. Next, fat gets converted into fatty acids that are used to support multiple systems. So the fat gets broken down by the body digestive processes into the fatty acids, and fatty acids do all sorts of important components in the body and functions. Just some simple examples here. They are used for blood clotting. So the fatty acids are present in the blood, and when your blood needs to clot, it is the fatty acids that make that possible, that help create those binds. Fatty acids are used to balance the immune system, to both support and regulate in the inflammatory response of the immune system to make sure that we have the defense we need against foreign invaders. And fatty acids are also used for important things like brain development and brain functioning. So lots of different components that the fatty acids get used for in our body. Then we get to protein, and we'll show the simple conversion path for protein, but it's also interesting to note that protein can also be included, can also be converted into any other element that is needed. So protein initially breaks down into peptides, and then for absorption, these peptides are further broken down into amino acids. And so then these amino acids help all sorts of processes in the body that make our lives better. For instance, they are used for protein synthesis. So they help create new proteins, help build the body up. They are used for hormone synthesis. So amino acids help make sure we have the proper regulation of hormones by making the process of hormone synthesis work. And they're also used for the creation and working of neurotransmitters. These are things like your adrenaline, your glutamine, dopamine, etc., serotonin even. So amino acids are important components for creating and functioning of all of these communication systems within the body. And as I mentioned back at the beginning of this slide, they also, because of the function of the liver, if the body finds that it has more amino acids than is needed, or if it finds that there is a critical need for something else, the liver can also convert the amino acids into fat or energy for other functions. And then finally, fiber is not necessarily considered a macronutrient as far as making it into the bloodstream as fiber, but it's very important for our discussion tonight about gut health for two reasons. First, fiber is a critical component of satiety, or the sensation of feeling full. So if you're finding that you're eating more than you want to, if you're finding that you're having a strong desire to snack all the time, that you're just not feeling like you're full, consider increasing the amount of fibrous foods in your diet, because fiber is critical to satiety. And then secondarily, fiber is absolutely crucial to gut health. So in the gut, the fiber acts as a cleaning agent. So what we have here is a visualization of the small intestine that is filled with these villi, and these villi is what actually receives and absorbs the food we eat through them. Well, you have a risk of foods that are not high in fiber. If you're eating a diet that's very low in fiber, you have the risk of larger food clumps, particularly if you're not chewing well, or if your stomach's having a hard time processing, of larger food chunks getting stuck and caking up in the intestine, reducing the surface area of these villi and making it so that you're not actually getting a lot of the nutrients that you're eating. And also, the other important part of fiber is that the fiber directly nourishes the microbiome. So the microbiome, these are microorganisms, friendly bacteria that live in your small intestine, and the friendly bacteria eat components of the fiber and turn those through their process into nutrients. So while the fiber itself is not a direct nutrient that is absorbed by the blood, the microbiome does convert it into vitamins and key nutrients that you need that do get absorbed. Okay, so we've covered the four general categories of the components that's in our food. So now let's look at the digestive process itself to understand how we're getting those elements delivered to the body. So we start with mechanical processing. So this is breaking down the biggest chunks of food. So mechanical processing starts with chewing, the first step in the process of digestion, chewing. And then the next component of mechanical processing is peristalsis, which is the action of as you swallow and the food moves from your mouth down to your stomach. As it goes through your esophagus, there is a squeezing, pushing motion that pushes the food down as it goes. And as it's pushing, it also is crushing the food more and breaking down the highest level of it. And finally, when the food makes it to the stomach is actually always flexing when there's food in there. It's flexing, moving, going in and out. And that motion is like the impeller of a washing machine or other mechanical processing that is continuing to break down the food further. So that's your main components of mechanical processing and digestion. Next, we go to the chemical processing, which is the enzymes and chemicals that break down the food more so that they move to those smaller states so they can be digested. So chemical processing actually starts in the mouth. So in our saliva, there are specific enzymes. The most prevalent one is the one that starts breaking down carbohydrates. And there's also some enzymes there that start breaking down fats. So your digestion on a chemical level of carbohydrates and fats starts in the mouth through the saliva as you're chewing. So it's all the more reason to chew a little bit more, because you ease the workload on the rest of the body by spending more time in the mouth with the saliva, with those elements that start breaking down the food. Next, we get down to the stomach, which has HCl, hydrochloric acid, which is part of the body's primary immune system defense because it's extremely acidic. And so the job of the HCl is to burn up most of the toxins and microbes that enter your food. So if your stomach acid is healthy and high, it plays a crucial role in keeping the food and things that you're ingesting from making you sick. But then also the protein processing starts in the stomach through pepsin, which is an enzyme that starts breaking down the proteins. So carbohydrates and fats start processing in the mouth. Proteins are being broken down in the stomach. And then as you move to the small intestine out of the stomach, then is where all the rest of the chemicals and enzymes that the body deploys to digest everything show up. So you end up with some of these enzymes that were in the mouth also show up again in the small intestine, as well as bile for processing fats and other chemicals that the body uses to do the chemical processing to break things down so that the body can use it. So next we'll look at the structural processing, or the structure of the small intestine, and why that structure is so important to our health, and why preserving and defending that structure is so important. And so this is the boundary where food actually enters the bloodstream. And for this, we're going to use the analogy of a castle wall. So we're going to say that your body is a city that is defended by a castle wall. And this castle wall we see here as these villi, as this surface of the small intestine. Now, if you think about it from a city perspective, a walled city, you think primarily from a defensive position of the boundary or the wall trying to keep bad things out, which it absolutely does. That's one of the big functions of the small intestine, is to keep bad things out. But for a city to survive and thrive, it must receive things in. Merchants have to come in and out. There has to be water. There has to be food. There has to be elements going in and out of the city. And so this boundary wall of the small intestine is to let the right things in and keep all the bad things out. So here is a deeper diagram of what those villi look like. So the food is going past the villi of the small intestine here, and you see that around the edge of these is these very tightly coupled cells that are designed to be that boundary, permitting what goes in and what does not. And then right underneath them is the bloodstream. So you have the veins and the arteries here that go up in each one. And so the nutrients that you're eating, that you're consuming, go through these tightly coupled joints, and the body is discerning about what it lets through and what it doesn't let through. The elements go through, get into the bloodstream, and then are transported in the bloodstream to where they're needed for those purposes throughout the body that we discussed back at the beginning. So again, the purpose is here: let good resources in, keep the bad guys out. And this is where we get to the problem that unfortunately is becoming increasingly prevalent today, that is referred to as gut hyperpermeability, or the common term of it is leaky gut. So we take that image of the villi of the small intestine, and we're going to break it down even further and look at it in more detail. So on this side, you have what a healthy version looks like, and this is what leaky gut looks like. So this healthy version, you see these tightly joined cells here are those cells that you see depicted here on the edge of the villi. And so when you're healthy, these are all very, very tightly coupled together. And on top of them, they have these microvilli, even smaller, that are there, whose purpose is to grab the elements. But also, you see that this is the mucus layer that's here. And this mucus layer is where your healthy bacteria lives. So this is where your healthy microbiome of your gut is actually living, is in this mucus layer. And so you have the good bacteria living here, the food particles come by, and only the right food particles are let through these junctions, and you end up with good, healthy blood flow because you just have your white blood cells, red blood cells, and the proper food particles that have been broken down into those three small elements that we discussed. The problem that you have, that so many people have today with leaky gut, is where through harsh chemicals, through antibiotics, through things that have weakened this mucosal layer and weakened the microbiome, food that is too big, like peptides. So you remember in the protein process, you had peptides as an intermediate step before you got to the amino acids. Those slightly bigger food ends up getting past the mucosal layer, ends up wedging itself in, and suddenly these joints are not tightly coupled anymore. And so you end up with bad bacteria sliding through, with gluten sliding through, with viruses and other things that should, under normal conditions, be able to be kept out of your city. Those items are all sliding through. And so as you see here, the blood is going to have a lot more elements in it. The blood is going to be sluggish. And so a person with leaky gut, their sensation of feeling sluggish, feeling tired, it's very, very real because the blood is more sluggish and they're more tired because their body's having to use far more energy in their immune system to defend against all this stuff that is making it into the bloodstream that isn't supposed to be there. So you have these multiple threats of particles that are too big, external microbes, and toxic chemicals that are sneaking through when your gut gets to this condition. So the final part is microbial processing. And for our analogy, you remember the microvilli here and the good bacteria that's living here in the mucosal layer. So for purposes of our analogy, your mucosal processing, your microbial processing are the soldiers on your city wall. So it's not just a wall that's subject to whatever's being thrown at it, but the actual soldiers on the wall who are helping make sure that the processing is working correctly, that the right things are being let in, and that the wrong things, the bad things, are being kept out. So in the microbial processing, the idea is support your troops, support your friendly bacteria, and they will defend your city. At the end of the day, gut health, your primary layer of defense in your gut, is defending your healthy microbiome and supporting your healthy microbiome. So because a depleted microbiome weakens the mucosal layer and lets unwanted things in. So antibiotics and harsh chemicals, you've heard probably a little bit about chemicals and pesticides and things being added to the food. Well, that's the biggest risk of those, is that those pesticides and harsh chemicals are messing with your microbiome. And then antibiotics, of course, the challenge with them is that antibiotics, yes, go after bad bacteria in your body, but to get to it, they have to make it through your good bacterial defenses. And so because they are antibiotics, they end up killing some of your good bacteria on the way to get in to try and get to the bad bacteria. And then lack of fiber, as we discussed briefly, means that the flow of nutrients into your city is blocked because you've got food patches caking up. So if you don't have fiber coming through and scrubbing physically, tangibly, the larger particles away, then you have food kicking up, and your ability, it's like having some of your gates into your city blocked because you have some of your villi that can't absorb new correctly sized nutrients because there's food caked onto it. But the other big problem is when you have food sitting there that has not been fully digested, that has not been fully broken down, and that's getting caked on there, bad bacteria, bacteria that you don't like for instance, Candida, can grow on that food that's caked there. And so you make it even harder for your soldiers because you have a food source for enemy soldiers sitting right there and readily available to them. And so the battle inside your intestine gets even more intense. So if you look at a healthy microbiome, if you're supporting your troops well, then the healthy microbiome finishes processing the food to make sure that it's small enough. It fights off the bad bacteria. You're going toe to toe, your friendly soldiers against the enemy soldiers. It converts food elements into beneficial vitamins and nutrients, like we talked about how the consumption of fiber there and your friendly flora eating the fiber, it actually converts it into key elements you need, like vitamin D and other nutrients. It actually, the friendly flora consumes stuff that's in your intestine, and the output from its life cycle is actually nutrients you need. So your microbiome is actually delivering extra nutrients that you need. And then finally, it supports healthy brain function and supports mood regulation, because so much of the neurotransmitters and the positive things that are associated with clarity of thought and with a good mood actually reside primarily in the gut. The research is continuing to find out that there is a tremendous gut to brain connection, that a healthy microbiome is directly responsible for your ability to think clearly, your ability to have proper function, your ability to regulate your mood effectively. So, what can you do to help make sure that you're actually getting your nutrients? What are your practical action steps you can take? So we're going to start with the primary processing, and then we'll move into the microbial. So number one, right out the gate, chew more. The more you chew, the more effective mechanical processing you're doing of your food, the less you're requiring the other systems in your body to need to process. Secondarily, taking that moment to pray or appreciate your food is actually a crucial part in your digestion, because by having those few moments before you eat where you're calm and you see your food and you smell your food, the seeing and smelling of your food actually, and the thinking about the food, that focus there actually causes the brain to start preparing and releasing into the saliva the right enzyme mix for what you're about to eat. And so that awareness, that moment of gratitude, that pause, that thinking about your food actually helps you, which when you really think about that and you see, you understand how the value of the home cooked meal, because with the home cooked meal, you're smelling it for a good amount of time before you eat it, and so it's preparing your body to process it right. And then we got into, and we've discussed a couple times, but again, practical standpoint, eat more fiber. So you can reduce your tiredness by increasing the available surface area of your gut through cleaning it with fiber. So as you eat more fiber in your diet, you help the villi clean out, you help things process through, and you make sure that your body can get what it needs. And then getting down into supporting the microbiome specifically, watch out for antibiotics. Antibiotics weaken your own microbiome on the way to the enemy bacteria. So avoid antibiotics whenever you can. Eat prebiotics. So we've talked about some of the prebiotic function of fiber, but looking specifically at other options. So raw foods, chicory root, Jerusalem artichoke, dandelion, garlic, onions, whole grains, and berries. There's others. But the important distinction between prebiotics and probiotics is that a prebiotic is something that you're eating to nourish the microbiome that's already there. And a probiotic is like calling in extra soldiers. A probiotic is bringing in extra of the microbiome that you need, extra of the friendly bacteria. And so things like yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, kefir, and other beneficial fermented foods, the thing that makes these beneficial is that they actually contain more of the beneficial bacteria that your body needs. And so you're giving your body extra soldiers on the wall. So it's artificial supplementation with extra soldiers to help defend your wall. Whereas the prebiotics is just sending a shipment of food to your soldiers, giving them things that they can eat in order to grow and reproduce more naturally. So that's the distinction between those two. And of course, the best is always if you can eat it. But if you find that in your diet or for whatever reason you're not able to eat sufficient probiotics, then you can also take probiotics. And as you know, when I can meet with you, I can share specific probiotics recommended for you. I have found very intriguingly, as I have dug in and done this work more, that all probiotics don't necessarily work for everybody. And so I end up recommending very specific probiotics for specific people based on their goals and what their body needs. So in review, winning the battle for gut health, let's look at our tactics. So we start by having effective ranged attacks, starting the processing as far away from the intestine as possible, which is chewing more. So your ranged attacks, your defense at a distance, chew more so that your gut can be healthier, so that you don't have to spend as much energy in the gut trying to process the food. Secondarily, our espionage. What are we using for our espionage, our counter surveillance, to make sure that we understand what's going on in this battle? Well, that is the taking time to slow down, think, smell, appreciate the food. By slowing down, it gives your body time to have intelligence about what you're about to eat and make sure that it's adjusting its processes to process well what you're about to eat. Next, we have keeping a clean and functional perimeter. And this, as we've mentioned multiple times throughout, comes from eating foods with fiber. So you see a rainbow of colors here, lots of different varieties of foods that have fiber. The idea is enjoy eating whole foods, foods with fiber, because that fiber, although it takes longer to chew, it takes a little bit longer. You can't wolf down the meal as fast, but that's a good thing. And the fiber can help clean the small intestine and give more of those prebiotic components that your flora needs. Feeding your troops, which is, of course, your prebiotics, delivering those things that specifically nourish your friendly bacteria. And finally, when needed, call in reinforcements. Bring in extra troops as needed through probiotics, as we see here: pickles, yogurt, kimchi, fermented foods, miso, etc. Okay. All right. So then rounding it out with a little bit of specific herbal bonus. So some specific herbal suggestions to help improve gut health. This first one actually comes straight from the FXNA team and Andrea Nakayama from her team. So this was something that I didn't know until I went through the herbal training with them. And that is that if you're using marshmallow root as a tea, in order to get the best gut support out of it, it needs to be cold, not hot. So instead of heating up water and doing the tea there, you take, so this is just a recipe that they have for one that they like as a good mix. So they take the marshmallow root, dried peppermint leaf, and fresh ginger, and put all the ingredients into a jar with cold filtered water over the herbs and just place in the fridge for at least 3 hours. And so that's getting the nutrients out of it just through sitting in cold water, not through, cooking it like a regular tea. And a couple of recommendations they had is make it before bed and allow it to steep overnight so you get more out of it. And then for flavor, and also because these other things do also help gut health, particularly the aloe, you could add aloe or apple cider vinegar or lemon in your cup afterwards to kind of mix to taste and get it where you want it to be. And because this mucilaginous effect of the marshmallow root helps heal up that mucosal lining that the friendly bacteria lives in. And so marshmallow root is a good way to help brew that up. And again, this recipe comes straight from the FXNA team. And then as far as a few things that I use, I think I probably have told most of you, but maybe I haven't got everybody. Aloe vera. I recommend aloe vera as the herb most common for helping improve gut health, simply because I've found it's the most gentle and effective. I know there's a lot of other herbs that herbalists will recommend that, hey, this can help, clear out constipation, or this can help heal. But I've just found that aloe vera is extremely gentle and effective at clearing out constipation, at helping to reduce the effects of leaky gut, at helping to reduce dairy sensitivity, at helping to reduce gluten sensitivity. And so really, for anybody who's struggling with gas, bloating, gut problems, aloe vera is one of my first go-tos that I say, hey, let's try that and see if that can get you the healing that you need to get your microbiome healthy again and get things moving out of there if things are stuck. And then slippery elm is another one that also has that mucilagenic effect. So it also supports the gut mucosal as well as if you're sick because your microbiome is not doing great, slippery elm does a great job of helping coat and soothe the throat as well. There's slippery elm lozenges, or you can make a slippery elm gruel or slippery elm tea. I've even seen recipes for like a slippery elm mush that you could eat for like oatmeal to help support the body in that way. All right, so that is all of the material that I had prepared. What additional questions do you have? I see there's some things in the chat, so let me look at that first. Does the harsh chemicals include the stuff we clean with or in the workspace? So from a harsh chemical perspective, and that's really kind of an interesting question, connecting this all together. This is something that I had not considered until I went through the deep training with Andrea's team, and that is that your digestive system is technically part of your skin. So if you think about it, there's the inside of you, like the essence of who you are, your bloodstream, and all of your internal systems, and then there's your outside surfaces, right? And because of how the digestive system is built, the digestive system technically counts as an outside surface, that the food is just passing through. And when you get to the small intestine, then it's choosing what to take out from that outside surface and to absorb. And so from a chemicals in your work and chemicals that you clean with perspective, it's not so much the gut where that's being affected, it's that your skin also has receptors. You can receive things through your skin. Like if you think about if you have a wound or an injury or anything, that you can put calendula or arnica on it, you can put those herbs and things on your skin, and you have the ability. Yes, it also is a defensive barrier, just like your gut, but there is also a certain level of permeability. And so the chemicals in your space, so basically you think about your toxic load from chemical exposure. So you have pesticides and things like that that you can eat with food. So that's hitting in there. You have chemicals in the air, which is hitting at the lungs, which the lungs is another one of those boundaries where things are crossing from outside of you to inside of you. So the effect of what's able to permeate at the lungs and then what's able to permeate at the skin. So from a harsh chemical load perspective, you have those three different vectors that you can have attacks from. And really, when you look at that, that's particularly just the overall chemical load of our society today, which is why in so many cases we end up having to keep nourishing intentionally, so intentionally, the gut microbiome in order to produce all those extra nutrients that we need from the microbiome for optimal health that are used, those vitamins that are used in other components and places around the body. And so it's the chemical attack is from all the vectors, and it's just the processing that we do through good food that we eat and through nourishing the microbiome helps the body have more of what it needs to fend off that constant chemical attack. And then what is the best way to heal your gut after having lots of rounds of antibiotics growing up? So really, it just goes back to the combination of the prebiotics and the probiotics. So immediately after you've had antibiotics, you want to really pound in the probiotics, really as many different varieties of probiotics as you can handle. So, and again, you can also take the supplements, but it's usually best if you can get it through food, if you have a way to do that. But you can take probiotic supplements, but then as many different ways as you can through food. So for instance, I try to personally, just in general as a maintenance level, I try to have miso at least once a week. I try to have sauerkraut 2 to 3 times a week, and I have yogurt every day. Just because I've found that yogurt helps me sleep. Plain yogurt, no sweeteners. And so I found so I take those on a regular basis. But yeah, in general, I would say try food-based probiotics. And then if you need additional support, you would go with a probiotic supplement. And then once you kind of get things going a little better and you're starting to feel like, hey, I'm okay, then you're going to want to move into the higher fiber content and the prebiotics to nourish the microbiome that you're really reestablishing there. And that's also another important point. Thank you for that question, by the way, because I hadn't really mentioned it, and that is that sometimes when your probiotics, when your friendly flora is so beat up, eating high fiber hurts. And so if eating high fiber hurts, then you back off with some gentler prebiotics, but you really hardcore hit the probiotics until your body has enough soldiers back on the wall that this is a delivery of useful supplies to those soldiers. Okay, and Kyle and Natalie, you had a question? You want to come off mute and ask your question?
How long do you think you need to take probiotics? Like I've heard people say, oh, you only have to for 2 weeks, or someone told me, oh, it takes at least 2 years. I'm not sure.
So here's the thing that I would say with that. With due consideration of how constant the environmental attack is, I would say just make probiotics and prebiotics part of your regular program that you do for your life. As far as the probiotic supplements, I don't take probiotic supplements, the pills, unless I have something specific that I'm trying to deal with. So for instance, if my regular level of fiber and prebiotics and probiotics is not cutting it, so I'm still dealing with gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea. Basically, if I'm having any symptoms that are showing that I'm just not cutting it from a microbiome perspective, I'm going to first increase my prebiotics and my probiotics to support that. And if that doesn't cut it, then I will go to actually taking a nutritional, a pill probiotic. But also to be clear, it's been years since I've taken an actual probiotic. But also to be clear, I've never taken antibiotics ever. I've never been willing to take them. And so just knowing me and my body, I've never taken antibiotics. But so I would say if you've had antibiotics and you're having any symptoms of an unhealthy microbiome, which is the symptoms are constipation, diarrhea, excessive tiredness, excessive irritability, inability to control your mood. And gas and bloating. So if any of those are present consistently, and you're already eating the probiotics that you're willing to integrate into your diet and the prebiotics, then yes, I would take a supplement, frankly, until your body replenishes. There really isn't a specific time because, as Andrea says many times, it depends. Like almost any question that somebody asks her, like her answer is it depends, because she really focuses on where the food meets the physiology of your body. And the answer to that question, so to summarize, the question of 2 weeks versus 2 years, the real answer is yes, that's true. Because for some people, if you consider the other factors in your life, because we've talked about mood a little bit, well, mood and the emotional climate of your life also affects the microbiome. And so if you're working in a job that you hate and you're not getting enough sleep and you're super stressed and you have all this pressure and you're living next to somewhere where somebody is spraying pesticides on their fields and you just have these constant threat vectors on your life, then frankly, you just got to keep taking probiotics constantly just to operate at a basic minimum level. But if you're able to eat organic food, if you're able to have low stress, if you're able to clean with chemicals that are not as toxic, if your overall toxic load is lower, then your gut is going to bounce back faster and you're going to be able to better respond, better recover. And so those ranges of 2 weeks to 2 years, the answer is yes. It depends on the individual and their circumstances. And then there was the question about how important is eating organic. So funny you should ask that. So throughout my life, I've studied a lot about health. I've studied a lot about, and I've just consumed information primarily just because candidly, I've always had a weak body. I've studied health a lot just to get to a place of being functional. Because I was born when my mom was 45 and just in general, weak systems. And so I've had to learn a lot just to not be sick. And so through all that study, I had come to see that the very best you can do for your health is to grow your own food. Because if you're growing your own food, you are getting exercise while you're going out and taking care of it. You're getting sunlight for the vitamin D. You're getting fresh air as long as you have enough plants around to counteract the pollution of the place you're living. And you're getting crucial elements from your food by being able to harvest them ripe. So there's a lot of my clients who deal with chronic inflammatory issues or are dealing with just pain all over. And one of the most common things that I end up recommending to people is an element called methylsulfonyl MSM. I recommend it for, frankly, anybody over 40, candidly, if you don't like being in pain, and just anybody else who has inflammatory conditions, because it is a crucial element that the body uses together with vitamin C in order to do the rebuilding process. So I don't know if you guys know, but the body is designed to completely replace itself every 7 years. So the processes within the body, the regenerative processes, are designed so that every 7 years, the body has completely replaced every cell. And so you're essentially a new person every 7 years. And so the thing that you have is without methylsulfonyl methane, unfortunately, that new person keeps being weaker and weaker versions of you physically. Whereas with methylsulfonyl methane, you have enough building blocks to keep rebuilding a strong version of you. In fact, I was just reflecting last week how honestly now I am stronger and healthier than I've been at almost any other point in my life through what I've been applying, specifically being intentional about health. And so that's just, and so you just look at that because methylsulfonyl methane is supposed to be in all of our food, but the plants don't inject that element into the food until the food is ripe. So at the point of ripeness is when the plant injects the methylsulfonyl methane in. And so if you have the ability to get ripe food, food that is not harvested green, and eat that, then you're getting those crucial extra set of elements to rebuild a stronger body. And so, I had studied this and kind of come to this conclusion. And then I read a book by Dr. David Perlmutter. I think it's something like The Gut-Brain Connection. And that's not the name of it. It's a book by Dr. Perlmutter, and it has a picture of broccoli on the cover. But he confirmed, like all the hypotheses that I had developed myself and connected, like this is what it looks like to be healthy. Like his book confirmed everything. I was like, I love this book because it's a doctor with scientific research confirming everything that I figured out. And so the question of how important is it to eat organic food? So number one, if it's truly organic, you have less of the chemicals. So just your overall chemical load is going to be lower. Your risk of gut hyperpermeability, leaky gut, is going to be lower. But the crucial thing is if it can be a farmer's market, like if you don't have the opportunity or the time to grow your own food, if it can be a farmer's market so that you can get the food when it's ripe, like just the how much better it is, like it's an exponential, like, hey, I'm okay. And so that makes a big difference is yes, reducing your toxic load by having organic, but also organic plus harvested ripe instead of harvested early. Because so much of the food in our food supply, even the good fruits and veggies and stuff, is harvested green and ripens on its way to the store, and you're missing the methylsulfonyl methane. Okay, and then ionic foot baths, removing toxins and improving gut health. So really anything that is, if you consider the surface area of your body, that your skin is another one of the exit points. It's the skin is one of your walls. And so any treatment that allows you to effectively remove toxins, it's a supportive treatment. And yes, you can totally get toxins out through your skin, out through your feet, particularly. There's many different ways. There's ionic foot baths. I personally have found very strong benefit in using onions on the feet. And so, for instance, if I have a croupy child, if I have, a child where it's that really raspy, hard cough and they're like really, really struggling and beginning to struggle to breathe, then as I put them to bed, I'll just dice up some onions and I first do a quick coating of the foot with olive oil to make sure there's no burning sensation, but we can still get the detoxification. So quickly rub the foot with olive oil, and then I just take a bag and I drop chopped onions into it. So I like chop an onion and do half of the onion in one bag and half the onion in another bag. Put the bag over the foot, positioning the onions so that they're on the bottom surface of the foot, because the bottom surface of the foot is your most effective way of releasing the toxins. And then I pull a large sock over that to hold it in place, and then carry the child to bed and have them sleep with that on their feet. And most of the time, a single night of doing that is enough support of the body releasing toxins that they can breathe fine the next day. They may not have all of their symptoms totally gone of that heavy, croup, but they can breathe better and they're generally okay the next day. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I wrote down a question. What was it? That's why I wrote it down. Oh yeah, what are the gentler prebiotics? You said you start out with more gentle ones if you.
Yeah. So if your gut has been compromised due to antibiotics or whatever to such a degree where fiber hurts, then you're going to start with more gentle ones. My most favorite gentle one that is a probiotic is miso. Miso is the gentlest probiotic that I'm aware of, because it comes in very, very gently, very smoothly, processes very well, also delivers a nice amount of protein as it goes, also delivers other key elements to help repair the liver, like selenium. And so really my favorite, hey, if somebody's really sick and I need to really help them, my favorite go-to is miso. And then I would go with yogurt next. And then a lot of your other probiotics are a little bit like stronger, more pungent. So if the person is, struggles with the more pungent things like sauerkraut or kimchi, then after introducing a miso and then a yogurt that they can handle, which again, you have to watch out if they have a milk sensitivity, you may need to do with a goat milk yogurt or other kind, or a coconut yogurt. But so you kind of introduce those, and then from a prebiotics perspective, honestly, my very favorite prebiotic is blueberries. They're just awesome. There's a few people who don't like blueberries, but blueberries generally are awesome as far as just a gentle, tasty way to nourish and support. For me personally, if I'm trying to do a quick shift, if so particularly for me, if I'm dealing with mood issues and general grumpiness and I want a quick shift, I've found that one of the most effective for me is grapefruit. That I'll eat a grapefruit and it can help me shift my mood and my general state of well-being quite quickly.
So are you saying you only need to really start with the gentle ones if you've been doing antibiotics or you have something really bad?
Yeah.
Or like, should I, if I'm battling the yeast?
So really the starting with the gentle ones is if the more intense ones hurt. I mean, because at the end of the day, the process of functional nutrition and the process of healing is listening to your body. So, like for instance, if you just despise the taste of sauerkraut, or when you eat any of these, like if there are a bunch of people who their gut is in such a condition that if they eat a high fiber food, that it's going to hurt. And so it's really just a case of going at the level and listening to your body. So I would say if you don't have, you know, if you don't have the situation where you eat and then it hurts, then I would say look at how you feel after eating it as far as deciding what's beneficial for you. So, and if anybody wants it, send me a message and I can send you a tool from Andrea's team. It kind of has a funny name, but it's a fun way to draw connections. It's called the Food Mood Poop Journal. So where you're tracking what you're eating, what your mood is, and what your poop is like as a 3-component capability to see what is leading to what. And so you do it for 5 days where you track it at around this, and we're not talking counting calories. We're not talking anything complex like that. It's just a simple, hey, around this time of day I ate this kind of food. And then around this time of day I felt like this and my poop looked like this. And just tracking that. And then that's something that we can come together and I can look at with you, and we can, and to a certain extent, you may draw some of the correlations yourself, or I can help you draw the correlations with my training to say, hey, we found when you eat this, this happens. And so if you're using that Food Mood Poop Journal while you're trying to introduce a higher supportive load for your digestive health, you can say, okay, I ate some, you know, blueberries, and 2 hours later, I was feeling pretty darn good. Or I ate grapefruit and I feel, you know, a little bit later I felt kind of crappy, so maybe my system doesn't like that. And so with the broad array of stuff, it's choosing different things and seeing how your body responds to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And are huckleberries just as good as blueberries?
I expect they are. I know that huckleberries are highly, what's the word? Fights free radicals. What is it called? It's called antioxidant. Most of the berries have very high antioxidant properties. I haven't seen as many people talking about huckleberries, but that would be something fairly easy to look up and see. You know, are huckleberries good prebiotics?
Okay, and then my other question I wrote down was when you make the cold marshmallow brew tea, is it, how important is it that the water you pour in is like cold? Can it also be room temperature and then put it in the fridge?
Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah, it doesn't have to be super cold. It's just the point is it shouldn't be hot, because the higher heat in this case breaks down the mucilagenic supportive effect. All right, well, I believe we're at time, so I will wrap up at this point. Thank you all for coming, and great to have you here.